growing pains. We do this with the new process we put in for the committees and for the programs. The Halloween event, traditionally, lots has been donated over the years, and it's donated anonymously and silently. It's never brought to my attention, so I never send out thank you letters and acknowledgement letters for their taxes, and they don't take it on their taxes, and that's happened, you know, for years with the Halloween event. So we have a situation this year where suddenly we had a bigger park to work with. So when Michael and I developed the budget, we were looking at, okay, what they had spent in the past, and you know, nobody brought it to our attention when we put their budget that, yes, but look, we have a whole much bigger park to work with, more area to cover, and more props. And so there were some decisions to spend more, and some individuals will wind up with a lot larger donation out of their pocket than in prior years. So it's kind of a question on how much do we reimburse, and how much is this person going to have to consider a donation out of their pocket.
Say that. A donation out of their pocket, but they get reimbursed, so have to be a donation?
It's not a donation, then that's the question, donation or no donation. If they're getting reimbursed, then it's not a donation. So, you know, it's a question of they've spent the money, and it's a question of how much are we reimbursing in terms of what's been spent.
So what are you saying, that somebody's spending the money over and above the budgeted amount?
Well, every year that's been done, people have donated stuff to the event. Lots has been bought and donated to the event. That's gone on.
Okay, but you're saying two different things. You're saying people are donating, and then people are getting reimbursed. Those are two different things. If you have $1,500 budget and you stay within that budget, and someone wants to donate $200 or $300 worth of whatever, spiders, that's over and above the budget and has nothing, it's a donation, has nothing to do with them being reimbursed.
Well, let me just give an example. For instance, we had, the town didn't think of something like we had volunteers here for, say, 8 hours that day, and the town didn't think of, well, you know, are we going to feed them? They're working for 8 hours straight. And so somebody bought pizzas for, say, everybody working. Well, that wasn't budgeted, it wasn't planned, and nobody really thought of it. But somebody paid for it. So are we going to ask that person when we're going to say, well, you paid for it, sorry, that's a donation?
Did they work with you first before they did that?
Well, no, but it was something that was unexpected, and there are provisions for the unexpected. Of course, they're emergency within the purchasing policies and procedures, but that's something that was unexpected. Nobody thought about it. And you did have the volunteers. We had how many, 100 volunteers or some number I heard working the Halloween event?
Should have been fed. I mean, yeah, that's good.
200 volunteers? 200 volunteers. So not all, of course, got fed, but.
I was just going to say that's a lot of pizza.
So but my point being, something along the lines of that, are you then going to tell this person, that's your donation, thank you for doing that, or are you going to say the town is going to reimburse you? So those are the unthought of kind of items that I'm talking about, something that happens along those lines. So in terms of an event like that, if the grand opening had $150 left, and a situation comes up like that, can we then reimburse that person, and it's okay for me to move the $150 that they were under on one event to that line item to reimburse that person? Is kind of what I'm getting to.
I would think so. If you feel that it's called for, there was an unexpected expense, and you feel that's justified, I don't have a problem with that.
I still think the person should pick up the phone and call you and say,
That's
this is what's going on. They shouldn't expect to be reimbursed if they're not.
And that did happen in the case of the hot dog buns. The hot dog buns were an expected donation because we had them left over. But it turns out that they went freezer burned and were ruined. So I got a phone call that day that said, we don't have any hot dog buns. In that case, I authorized someone to go get that in care of it. And that reimbursement, in my opinion, was an emergency expenditure apparently, and it was not part of the $1,500 because we didn't expect to have to do that. We were expecting that to have been a donation essentially. So that's a case where I did authorize specifically that case. But when you have that number of people and they're buying a pizza, a couple of pizzas, they're not thinking, at that moment in time, they just want to feed somebody. And they don't think about, well, geez, I need to make sure I get that approved so I can turn it in type situation. So that's what it's really a question of whether there's an obligation on the part of the town to say, thank you for feeding our people in that case. And we have some funds available from another source that has already occurred that we can move into it. Hey,
It wouldn't be a bad idea if we had a dollar amount connected to this. If somebody wants to go out and on their own and spend $50 on pizza and expect to get reimbursed from the town, that's not bad, but suppose somebody decides to go out and spend $500 on something and then wants to get reimbursed from the town. I think there needs to be some kind of dollar amount that's within reason.
Well, in an instance like this, there's really not much money to play with anyway, because, each program has a budget, and right now, the only budgets we have to play with are the 5K, because we didn't spend anything for that one. And we had $100 and some left over, so right now, we only have $600 that we can even move around. We're never talking a substantial amount of money, because there isn't a substantial amount of money to play with, and we haven't had most of these events anyway, so there is no budget to take from. So
Let me just get this clear in my head. I can only go back to the history committee. They had this money set aside that wasn't designated for anything, and so council said, before you spend funds that the town has budgeted, you have to use some of that, and you have to use that money up. So are we saying the same thing in this instance, that before you use budgeted funds, you have to use, say, the money from the 5K or whatever? You have to use that money.
you got two different situations, because one's not budgeted, historical wasn't budgeted. These are budgeted funds, and we're just moving between line items. So we have two different situations. You have two budgeted items, but one wasn't spent and one's overspent potentially. And then the other one is totally, wasn't budgeted, so they can't spend it at all unless the budget amendment is done and council approves it. So you got two kind of different situations. But I didn't want to overstep my bounds based on the budget discussions, because at budget time, you wanted them to be very specific and come up with a budget per event. And you were specific about that to the committee, so I didn't want to overstep that and do a finance officer amendment without you saying that's what your intent is for me to be able to do that.
Can we set a dollar amount on the finance officer amendment?
You could if you wanted to,
I mean,
overall.
$200, something within reason. I just don't think that, people should have carte blanche to go out and spend money and then expect.
Who bought the pizza, didn't take a phone call and ask, Dan?
I don't know who bought the pizza. That was just an example, one of the items. I don't know who exactly.
When anybody's here for 8 hours, of course you're gonna feed the people. But I mean, that was not very good planning, so.
Well, it was, I think that there was a lot more that went into this event than has ever been done because of the extent of the park. We have a large parking cover now. And I don't know, somebody may have bought pizzas previously in prior years, but it's one of those things, this was a lot larger event this year, so are we gonna expect people to put that out of their pocket, and did they know it wasn't in the budget? For instance, if I bought the pizzas and I thought it was part of the budget, and then I find out that it wasn't part of the budget, nobody thought about it, and suddenly I'm out my money, and I wasn't expecting to be out my money. It's a situation like that where I wanted to have the leeway within the budget to be able to handle situations. And of course, you know me, I'm cheap as it is, and I'm pretty frugal, so I'm not going to allow people to just walk all over our budget as the other item. So if it's me doing it, you know that there are going to be some constraints on it. But I wanted to, at least council to give me the leeway to be able to do that.
Why don't we do that?
That's what like a dollar amount.
Well,
The dollar amount is what was set for the budget. I mean, if they understand for one and overspend for another, they can't get more than we allow to be approved.
Exactly. And what we would hope with the funds raised is that if they want, that they would know before the event that I plan on raising these funds